that dog in him, and Anthony Edwards has that talent and that dog in him. So they got a little bit of everything there.
So who won that trade? I'm still trying to figure out who won that trade.
Yes. I think we may find out in June.
Well, I mean,
if they play each other.
Well, you said we may find out in June. If the Knicks don't make it out of this series against the Celtics, I think we have our answer.
Well, yeah, in that case, yes. Let's talk about the Warriors. They're done. Steph Curry, the T-Wolves did their job. That was as much of a must-win as anything last night because you cannot let Steph Curry back in this series. It is horrible that he got hurt. We all feel terrible for him.
Yeah.
The T-Wolves don't need to feel terrible for him. The T-Wolves need to look at it and say, we could never let him back on the floor. We knew he was going to potentially come back Game 6, and they never let him back on the floor. And now what for the Warriors? Now what happens? Steve Kerr, head coach of the Warriors, post-game, the Steph what if, does that now play a factor with the Warriors?
Injuries are, part of the playoffs. I learned a long time ago, the playoffs are really about health and then just guys stepping up and making some big shots, big plays, in key games. That's what decides every series. So we've been on both ends of that. That's just part of it. So there's no sense in dwelling on it. I don't want to take anything away from what Minnesota just accomplished. So no sense in even talking about Steph.
Okay. Fair, understood. Draymond Green had this to say about the future of the Warriors.
I think we'll be right back at it. Sucks to end this way, but we think we got the pieces to make another run at it and do it again, and that's going to be our mindset going into the summer. Do all that got to do to improve. We got one of the best ownership groups and front offices in the NBA who know they'll do whatever they feel is needed to help the team improve. And us as players, you got to get back in the lab and do what you got to do to get better.
So Draymond, back at it. I understand what he's saying because their record with all of their guys healthy was very good this year. They got Jimmy for moments like this, and just in case Steph is not healthy, Jimmy Butler the last few games, maybe banged up. It's not the playoff Jimmy that we saw previously, obviously, in Miami, which was not the playoff Jimmy we saw in Philly, to be fair, or Chicago, or Minnesota. It happened one spot because the team was built around him, and that's obviously different in this case. No, I'm saying it shouldn't be built around him. It's Steph Curry. So is this dynasty now over?
Well, you're thinking he's getting at Miami, bringing out the best in players.
Yes, man,
Jimmy
let
Butler.
it go, man. Jimmy Butler is an absolute
that's obvious.
dog.
Everyone knows that.
He's been a dog no matter where he's been. He's just got with a functional franchise in the Miami Heat relative to the Chicago Bulls or the Minnesota Timberwolves back in the day or the Philadelphia 76ers. So when Jimmy's with a functional team, obviously in the postseason, it brings out the best in him, but he's only been there half a season.
Right, and they had a great record with him.
This roster is not oriented around him. Like you said, it's Steph Curry's team.
Yep.
Only problem I have with Draymond's logic is that older guys don't get healthier as they get later in their careers. Dre and Jimmy are 35 years old. Steph Curry's 37. So there's no guarantee that this won't happen if the Warriors get back to this exact same spot next year. And you have to question with this roster, are they going to be able to find reliable depth where they don't have to play those guys as extensive minutes as they've been playing them? I don't know. There are more questions than answers in Golden State. And while you do want them to be able to take advantage of the twilight of Steph Curry's career, we have to also acknowledge that they have to do some major retooling on that team in order for them to be able to maximize what Curry brings out to the table.
All right, I put Small's feet to the fire on Tibbs.
Yeah.
In your mind, if you were Mike Dunleavy Jr. and you ran the Golden State Warriors, was that Draymond Green's last game with your franchise?
Yes. Yes.
Do you tell
listen,
Steph?
I have
do
to
it
have
behind
some.
Steph's back?
Let me be clear about one thing. Yeah. I have to have elements of Draymond Green. I have to. So even with the moving pieces, even if I do decide to trade him, I've got to find some guys that are dogs to bring back. I've got to have that type of temperament in my locker room because you have to have a bully, especially around Steph Curry. He's got to have an enforcer. It's kind of like hockey in that way. So you have to have that element. But Draymond has so much valuable because he's got championship DNA, because he's got 4 rings, because he's been there, because he's done that. There's going to be a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers that looks at Draymond Green and says, you know what? We need more of that in our locker room. You know what I'm saying? We need to have that type of element. Like these young upstart groups that have a lot of talent but don't necessarily have that nasty, don't have that dog. The Houston Rockets, they need a Draymond Green. The Detroit Pistons, they need a Draymond Green. Like those are teams that need that kind of element. But when you look at the Golden State Warriors, yeah, you feel like they need Draymond Green too, but they need so much other stuff in order to maximize what Steph Curry is bringing to the party.
All right, so very quickly, and there's not going to be a quick answer, but here we go. If you take Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Jonathan Kuminga would have to be a sign and trade. And this is now like 3, 4, 5 teams.
Yeah.
Is that enough to get you Giannis?
No.
Not to Milwaukee. Not to Milwaukee. What, like, in other words, who wants Jimmy? Okay, that you're going to get Jimmy and you're going to give us this. We're going to give it to Milwaukee. You know, who wants Draymond? Cleveland. Like, all right, what are you going to give us? Maybe Milwaukee would want Darius Garland, right? Who wants Kuminga? Sign and trade. Maybe it's the Nets and they would provide some draft. I'm just making this up. I wonder if that's where the Warriors' offseason starts. In other words, I don't know that they have interest in trading Draymond, but Giannis gives you everything that Draymond gives you at a higher level. And I do wonder if they say the consolidation move is actually to get the greatest possible player that might be, and I don't know that he is, available. I just wonder if that.
They were certainly the beneficiaries of Jalen Brunson getting into foul trouble, picking up his 5th foul in the 3rd quarter. Made it hard for Tibbs to keep him out there on the floor. And when Jalen Brunson is not orchestrating, the Knicks struggle on both ends of the court. So that's certainly a part of the math. But I also thought for the Boston Celtics, the way they played last night with the ball not sticking by being able to move it, Jaylen Brown being the tip of the spear, not only on the offensive end, but on the defensive end, I thought that was huge. I mean, offensively, Jaylen Brown breaking down the defense, getting dribble penetration, forcing the doubles, then kicking out to open shooters was a tremendous formula. And it shows. The Boston Celtics have had 2 games, including last night, where they've had over 20 assists for the games. Both of those were wins for them. All the other games in the series, they've been in the teens when it comes to assists. It was too much hero ball, too much ISO ball. Look at Tatum, look at Brown, everybody just stand around. Last night, everybody got involved. Everybody touched it on the offensive end. And what does that do? That activates you on the defensive end. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that we saw Luke Cornett give us shades of Kevin McHale in terms of blocking shots and rebounding, because he was getting fed on offense, all of the rim runs. When you got Luke Cornett catching backwards alley-oop dunks, you got something going. And I thought it was all about the ball movement that the Celtics were able to initiate on the offensive end. And anytime you score the basketball on offense, you're excited about playing defense. Why? Because you get stops to get back on offense. That's exactly what we saw from the Boston Celtics last night.
No doubt, CC. And yesterday when we talked to Udonis Haslem, who joined us here in studio, I asked him, how did the Celtics steal the game tonight? How do they win without Jason Tatum? And he said, first things first is they have to make sure that they're focused on just this game, that they're not thinking about the series as a whole. They're not thinking about the deficit. They're focused on just this game. And you saw them come out with that energy, that sense of urgency, that physicality. And I loved what Joe Mazzulla said after the game. He said that you can't choose, you don't get to pick the test that you have, you pick how you respond to them. You pick how you respond to the test. And that's exactly what the Boston Celtics did last night. And I knew that we were going to get the best swing from the defending champs, that they were going to want to go out and win one for Jason Tatum and show that they were still in this thing. But watching that game last night, I kept thinking, if the Knicks don't win this series, when the Celtics do not have Jason Tatum, when Porzingis is clearly sick, he was out there, 12 minutes last night? He had problems breathing because of that lingering viral illness.
This scares me, side note.
Same. It's very, very alarming that he's still battling this. But you don't have Tatum, you don't have Porzingis, and the defending champs, they lost 3 games to you where they gave up double-digit leads, 2 of them being 20 points. If the Knicks do not close out this series and the Boston Celtics find a way to come back and win this,